Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Confidence is not something we are born with. It is something we build. And like any skill, it requires practice, intention, and the right set of rules. Today, I want to share with you 5 rules that can help you build unstoppable confidence, not the kind that fades when things get tough, but the kind that grows stronger with every challenge. Rule number 1, clarity over perfection. Most people think confidence comes from being flawless. It doesn't. True confidence is built when we choose clarity over perfection. When you know what you stand for, when you know your values and your direction, you don't need to have all the answers. You simply need to be clear about why you're here and where you're going. Clarity makes you grounded. Perfection makes you anxious. Rule number 2, keep the promises you make to yourself. Confidence comes from trust. And the first person you need to trust is yourself. Every time you set a small goal and follow through, whether it's waking up early, finishing that project, or even keeping a workout schedule, you send yourself a message, I can rely on me. The more promises you keep, the stronger your self-trust becomes. And self-trust is the foundation of unstoppable confidence. Rule number 3, redefine failure as progress. The people who lack confidence are often the ones who are terrified of making mistakes. But the truth is, failure is not the opposite of success. It's the process of success. Every setback is a lesson. Every mistake is feedback. Confidence is not built by avoiding failure. It's built by embracing it, learning, and moving forward. Rule number 4, surround yourself with growth-minded people. Confidence is contagious. If you spend your time with people who only criticize or discourage, you'll start doubting yourself. But when you surround yourself with those who challenge you, encourage you, and believe in growth, you naturally rise to that standard. The environment you choose shapes the belief you have in yourself. Rule number 5, act before you feel ready. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite it. Most of us wait until we feel confident before we take action. But that's not how it works. Action creates confidence. The moment you step up, speak up, or take that risk, your brain learns, I can do this. Confidence follows action, not the other way around. So remember clarity, self-trust, redefining failure, the right environment, and bold action. These 5 rules will not only build your confidence, but will make it unstoppable because it will no longer depend on circumstances. It will come from within. Thank you. 5 keynotes of the speech. Clarity over perfection. Focus on purpose and direction instead of trying to be flawless. Keep promises to yourself. Build self-trust through consistent small wins. Redefine failure as progress. See mistakes as lessons, not as evidence of weakness. Surround yourself with growth-minded people. Your environment either fuels or drains your confidence. Act before you feel ready. Action is the true creator of confidence. Clarity over perfection is one of the most underestimated rules in building unstoppable confidence, yet it is the very foundation of how people learn to trust themselves and show up authentically in the world. Too often, people chase the illusion of perfection, believing that once they know everything, once they have every skill mastered, once they never make a mistake, then they will finally feel confident. But the truth is, perfection is an endless game you can never win. There will always be something more to learn, another skill to improve, another flaw to fix. If confidence were dependent on perfection, none of us would ever truly feel it. That is why clarity matters so much more. When you are clear on who you are, what you value, and what you stand for, you don't need to be perfect. You simply need to be consistent with that clarity. Clarity gives you a sense of direction, and direction creates confidence. Think about the times you have felt lost, unsure of what step to take next, and how much that uncertainty made you doubt yourself. The mind thrives on clarity because clarity tells you, this is the path I am choosing. You don't have to know every step in advance, but you do have to know where you are heading and why you are moving in that direction. Without that clarity, you'll find yourself chasing the approval of others, shifting your actions based on what people might think, and doubting whether you're doing the right thing. But when you are clear, even if things go wrong, you stand firm because you know what you're about. Imagine a speaker standing in front of an audience. If that speaker is focused on being perfect, they will stumble over every small mistake. They'll replay in their mind whether their words were polished enough, whether their voice cracked, whether the audience noticed a slight error. And all of that mental energy will chip away at their presence and their confidence. Now imagine that same speaker standing in front of the audience, not concerned about perfection, but deeply clear on why they are there, to inspire, to teach, to share a message. Even if they make a mistake, their clarity keeps them steady. They can recover quickly because their focus is not on appearing flawless, but on delivering something meaningful. This is what clarity does. It anchors you in purpose, not performance. Clarity also simplifies decision-making. People who are obsessed with perfection often paralyze themselves with endless overthinking. They delay action because they want everything to be just right before they begin. They rewrite, revise, and rehearse endlessly. But those who prioritize clarity over perfection make faster, more confident decisions because they know what aligns with their values and what doesn't. They may not have the perfect plan, but they have a clear reason to move forward. That clarity gives them momentum, and momentum is far more powerful than waiting for some unattainable state of perfection. Another reason clarity is more valuable than perfection is that it makes you authentic. Confidence is not about wearing a mask of perfection so that no one can see your flaws. People can sense when someone is pretending to be flawless, and it usually comes across as arrogance or insecurity. But when someone is clear about who they are and what they stand for, they don't need to pretend. They can admit mistakes, they can show vulnerability, and paradoxically, that makes them more confident in the eyes of others. Clarity frees you from the exhausting task of trying to manage every detail of how others perceive you, and instead allows you to show up as yourself. Think about leaders, mentors, or role models you admire. Chances are they weren't perfect. They may have made mistakes, had setbacks, or faced criticism. But what made them confident and compelling was their clarity. They knew their mission, their principles, and their vision. That is why people followed them. Their confidence was not rooted in an absence of flaws, but in the presence of conviction. That is the difference clarity makes. When you replace perfection with clarity, you also remove one of the biggest obstacles to confidence: comparison. Perfection keeps you measuring yourself against everyone else, constantly asking, am I as good as them? Am I doing it the right way? But clarity shifts the focus inward. You no longer need to outdo others. You simply need to stay true to what you are clear about. You know your values, your priorities, and your reasons. That clarity creates a sense of peace because you stop competing in someone else's race and start running your own. And finally, clarity is sustainable while perfection is exhausting. No one can maintain the appearance of flawlessness forever. Eventually, cracks will show. And when they do, those who have built their confidence on perfection will crumble. But those who have built their confidence on clarity don't crumble when flaws are exposed. They adapt, they learn, they adjust, but they remain steady. Clarity becomes a compass, guiding them forward no matter what challenges arise. This is why clarity over perfection is the first and most important rule in building unstoppable confidence. Perfection is a myth, but clarity is a choice. And every time you choose clarity about your values, your purpose, your next step, you build a deeper kind of confidence that does not waver with mistakes or criticism. Clarity is what allows you to move forward with strength, knowing that even if you stumble, you are still on the right path. Keeping promises to yourself is one of the most powerful ways to build true, lasting confidence, because confidence is nothing more than the result of trust. When you look at people who radiate self-belief, who carry themselves with certainty and act decisively, what you are really seeing is a person who has built a deep reservoir of trust with themselves over time. They don't need constant validation from the outside world because they have learned to rely on their own word, their own commitment, and their own actions. Just as relationships with others thrive on trust and deteriorate with broken promises, the relationship you have with yourself follows the same principle. Every time you do what you said you would do, you strengthen that relationship. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you weaken it. Think about the small commitments you make in daily life. It might be telling yourself you'll wake up early to exercise, or that you'll finally finish that piece of work you've been putting off, or that you'll reduce your time on social media. In those moments, whether or not you keep the promise might seem insignificant. But in reality, each kept or broken promise is a message you send to your own mind. When you follow through, you tell yourself, I can count on me. When you don't, you reinforce the belief that your word to yourself isn't reliable. Over time, this shapes your confidence far more than any external achievement because your brain is constantly collecting evidence about whether you can trust yourself. The reason this rule is so critical for confidence is because self-trust is the foundation of courage. If you do not trust yourself to follow through, you will hesitate before taking bold action. You'll second-guess decisions, procrastinate, and avoid challenges because deep down you're not sure you'll back yourself up. But when you have built a habit of keeping promises, you approach challenges differently. You know that even if things get tough, you'll stay committed, you'll push through, and you'll honor the goals you set. That kind of certainty creates an inner strength that is visible to everyone around you. It's also important to understand that the promises we keep to ourselves don't have to be monumental. In fact, confidence grows fastest when you start with small, consistent promises. Something as simple as drinking a glass of water in the morning, journaling for 5 minutes a day, or making your bed can create the first layers of self-trust. Each time you follow through, it's like laying a brick in the foundation of confidence. Over weeks and months, those small actions accumulate into something solid. The mistake most people make is setting massive promises too quickly, like committing to an intense workout plan or an ambitious project and then abandoning them after a few days. This not only halts progress, but actually erodes confidence because the broken promise tells your brain that your commitments can't be trusted. Another dimension to keeping promises to yourself is the integrity it builds. Integrity isn't just about being honest with others. It's about aligning your actions with your words, especially when no one else is watching. There is something powerful about being the kind of person who does what they say they will do, even in private. That integrity strengthens your sense of identity and creates a quiet, unshakable confidence. You don't need to announce it or prove it to anyone. You simply carry yourself differently when you know you can trust your own word. At the same time, it's worth acknowledging that keeping promises to yourself requires discipline, and discipline often requires discomfort. There will be days when you don't feel like showing up, when excuses sound louder than commitment, when the easier choice is to let yourself off the hook. But these are the moments where confidence is built. Following through in times of discomfort sends a louder, more powerful message to your brain than following through when it's easy. Every act of discipline tells you, I have control. I can depend on myself regardless of how I feel. That message builds resilience, and resilience is inseparable from confidence. There is also a feedback loop between promises and self-respect. When you keep promises to yourself, you respect yourself more. And when you respect yourself, you project confidence naturally. On the other hand, when you consistently break your promises, your self-respect diminishes. You might cover it up with arrogance, excuses, or distractions, but deep down you know that you cannot rely on your own commitments. This inner conflict eats away at confidence until it becomes fragile and dependent on others for reassurance. Keeping promises to yourself also rewires how you see challenges. If you've built a track record of following through, you no longer see challenges as threats. You see them as opportunities to prove to yourself, once again, that you can be trusted. Every difficult task becomes a chance to strengthen confidence because you've trained your mind to believe that you will not quit halfway. This doesn't mean you will always succeed, but it means you'll never abandon yourself in the process. And that mindset is incredibly empowering. Ultimately, the rule of keeping promises to yourself is about creating alignment between you say you are and what you actually do. When there is alignment, there is confidence. When there is a gap, when you say one thing and do another, doubt fills that space. People who live with clarity and confidence are not necessarily the most talented, the most intelligent, or the most skilled. They are the ones who have built an unshakable trust in their own word. They know that their promises matter, especially the private ones no one else can see. And in honoring those promises, they build a form of confidence that no setback or criticism can take away. Redefining failure as progress is one of the most liberating shifts a person can make in their mindset, and it is essential for building unstoppable confidence. Most people are taught from a very young age to view failure as a sign of weakness, as something shameful, as proof that they are not good enough. This conditioning leads many to avoid risks, to hold back ideas, and to never push themselves to their true potential. The fear of failure becomes the greatest barrier to confidence because it convinces people that mistakes define them rather than refine them. The truth is that failure is not the opposite of success. It is the process of success. Every accomplishment in history, every invention, every breakthrough, every great story of triumph has been paved with failures that taught, shaped, and strengthened the person behind it. When you begin to redefine failure as progress, something profound happens. Instead of avoiding challenges because you might not succeed, you lean into them knowing that whatever the outcome, you will come out wiser, stronger, and more prepared than before. This mindset shift removes the paralyzing pressure of perfection. You no longer have to wait until everything is certain before you act, because even if things go wrong, the experience itself is valuable. Confidence is not about having a flawless track record. It is about knowing that no matter the result, you will grow from it and keep moving forward. Consider how a child learns to walk. They do not take a few steps and then decide, I've fallen too many times, maybe walking isn't for me. They fall, they stumble, they trip. And yet with each attempt, their body learns balance, coordination, and strength. What looks like failure is actually progress. The same is true for every skill and every dream we pursue. The moments that feel like failure are simply the stumbling steps that carry us toward mastery. But somewhere along the way, as we grow older, society teaches us to be embarrassed by falling down. We internalize the belief that mistakes disqualify us rather than develop us. To build unstoppable confidence, that belief must be replaced with the truth that each mistake is proof that we are learning and moving forward. Confidence also grows when you stop attaching your identity to failure. Many people say, I failed, and then quietly translate it into, I am a failure. This is one of the most damaging thought patterns a person can have. Failure is an event, not a label. It is something that happens, not something you are. When you separate your identity from the outcome, you allow yourself the freedom to experiment, to take risks, and to innovate without the constant fear of being defined by the result. That separation is what allows confidence to thrive, because you no longer carry the heavy weight of needing every attempt to succeed perfectly. You can enter situations with courage, knowing that your worth is not determined by whether you win or lose, but by how much you grow in the process. Redefining failure as progress also shifts the way you respond to setbacks. Instead of collapsing under disappointment, you begin to ask, what is this teaching me? Every failure carries information about what works, what doesn't, about your strengths, your blind spots, and the adjustments you need to make. Failure in this sense becomes feedback, and feedback is one of the most valuable resources for growth. People who fear failure ignore feedback because it hurts their ego. People who embrace failure actively seek feedback because it accelerates their development. The difference between the two is not intelligence or talent, but perspective. One sees failure as the end, the other sees it as a step. The most confident individuals are rarely the ones who succeeded on their first attempt. More often, they are the ones who failed repeatedly but refused to let failure stop them. Every time they got back up, they built resilience, and resilience is confidence in action. When you've fallen and stood up enough times, you no longer fear the fall. You begin to trust in your ability to recover, and that trust is what creates a deep, unshakable confidence. You stop asking, what if I fail? and start saying, when I fail, I'll learn, and when I learn, I'll succeed. A failure as progress also helps you break free from comparison. When you view failure as shameful, you look at others who seem more successful and feel inferior. But when you see failure as part of the journey, you recognize that every person you admire has faced their own failures along the way. Confidence grows when you stop measuring yourself against someone else's highlight reel and instead embrace your own path with all its ups and downs as valuable and necessary. Each failure becomes a unique part of your story, and instead of hiding it, you can own it with pride because it represents growth. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of redefining failure as progress is the freedom it gives you to take action without hesitation. So many people wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, or the perfect certainty before they take the first step. But in reality, that moment never comes. Progress requires action, and action will inevitably include missteps. When you embrace failure as part of the process, you no longer wait, you act. And with each action, whether successful or not, your confidence deepens because you are proving to yourself that you are willing to move forward regardless of the outcome. Failure is only failure if you stop. If you keep going, it becomes progress. The people who build unstoppable confidence are not those who avoid failure, but those who redefine it, who use it as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block, and who see every misstep as a necessary part of the path forward. Surrounding yourself with growth-minded people is one of the most transformative choices you can make if you want to build unstoppable confidence. Human beings are social creatures, and whether we realize it or not, the environments we spend time in and the people we allow close to us shape our beliefs, our actions, and ultimately our sense of self. Confidence is not built in isolation. It is nurtured, reinforced, and sometimes challenged by the company we keep. If you spend your time in an environment where negativity, doubt, and criticism dominate, it will be almost impossible to maintain a strong sense of belief in yourself. But when you are surrounded by people who believe in growth, who encourage progress, and who celebrate effort as much as results, you begin to rise to that standard naturally. The people closest to you function like mirrors. They reflect back the way they see you, and over time, you begin to internalize those reflections. If your circle constantly questions your ideas, mocks your ambitions, or minimizes your achievements, you will start to doubt whether you are capable of more. Even if deep down you have potential, that environment will make you second guess yourself until your confidence shrinks. On the other hand, if your circle challenges you with constructive feedback, reminds you of your strengths when you forget them, and encourages you to aim higher, you internalize that as well. Their belief in you reinforces your belief in yourself. Confidence is not simply a personal trait. It is contagious. It spreads either positively or negatively, depending on who you allow into your environment. This is why growth-minded people are so important. A growth-minded person sees ability and potential as something that can be developed through effort, practice, and persistence. They are not fixated on labels like talented or gifted, but instead focus on improvement and learning. Being around people like this changes how you see your own journey. When you stumble, they don't define you by the mistake. They remind you that setbacks are part of the process and encourage you to keep going. Their perspective normalizes effort and perseverance, which makes it easier for you to stay confident when things don't go perfectly. Contrast that with a fixed-minded environment where mistakes are seen as proof of inadequacy. In that kind of atmosphere, confidence is fragile because any misstep feels like exposure of your flaws rather than a chance to grow. The subtle but powerful effect of surrounding yourself with growth-minded people is that they raise your standards without making you feel inadequate. They push you to think bigger, to refine your skills, to challenge your comfort zone. But they do it from a place of belief that you can rise to the challenge. This is very different from people who criticize or pressure you out of comparison or insecurity. Growth-minded people are invested not in tearing you down, but in seeing you become the best version of yourself. That kind of environment allows confidence to thrive because you're not constantly on the defensive. You're encouraged to play offense, to explore, to experiment, and to expand. Another important factor is that confidence often comes from proof, and proof is built through action. Growth-minded people help create the conditions for you to take those actions. When you are around them, you are less afraid to speak up, to try new things, or to take risks because you know they won't immediately judge you harshly for failing. They will support the attempt, celebrate the courage, and help you learn from the outcome. Each of those experiences adds to your own internal evidence that you are capable, and over time that evidence becomes confidence. In contrast, if you are in an environment where every risk is met with ridicule or negativity, you will likely stop taking those risks altogether, which denies you the chance to build proof of your abilities. It's also worth remembering that we naturally absorb the language, mindset, and behaviors of those around us. If you consistently hear conversations filled with possibility, learning, and optimism, your own internal dialogue begins to echo that same tone. But if you are constantly surrounded by negativity, gossip, and complaints, your inner voice begins to mirror that as well. Confidence is heavily influenced by self-talk, and self-talk is often shaped by the voices we hear most often. Choosing growth-minded people isn't just about who you spend time with. It's about choosing the kind of inner dialogue you want to cultivate. Sometimes building unstoppable confidence requires making difficult choices about relationships. It might mean distancing yourself from people who consistently undermine your growth, even if they are familiar or comfortable to be around. It might mean seeking out mentors, colleagues, or communities that share your values of progress and resilience. It might even mean being selective with what you consume online, ensuring that the digital voices influencing you are ones that inspire growth rather than sow doubt. These choices can be uncomfortable, but they are necessary because the environment you place yourself in will either nourish or starve your confidence. When you surround yourself with growth-minded people, you also start to redefine what success looks like. Instead of measuring yourself against unrealistic standards of perfection, you begin to value learning, effort, and consistency. You stop asking, did I succeed perfectly? And start asking, did I grow from this? That shift in perspective reduces the fear of judgment and increases your willingness to act, which is the very essence of confidence. Growth-minded people model this behavior themselves, and by observing them, you internalize the same habits and beliefs. In the end, confidence is not just about what you believe about yourself in isolation. It is about the ecosystem of influence you live within every day. The right people make you braver, the right people remind you of your strengths, and the right people hold you accountable to the vision you have for yourself. Surrounding yourself with growth-minded people is like giving your confidence a fertile soil to grow in. No matter how strong the seed of self-belief may be, it will struggle in a toxic environment. But in the right one, it will flourish until it becomes unshakable. Acting before you feel ready is one of the most crucial steps in building unstoppable confidence because it challenges one of the biggest myths people believe about confidence, that it comes first and action follows. Most of us grow up thinking that once we feel confident, then we will finally have the courage to take the leap, give the speech, start the business, or pursue the opportunity. But the reality is the opposite. Confidence is not the prerequisite. It is the byproduct. Confidence is created through action. It is built when you step into the unknown, when you do the thing you were afraid of, and when you prove to yourself through experience that you are capable. Waiting until you feel ready only ensures that you never begin because that feeling of being ready almost never arrives. Fear and doubt are natural companions of growth. Whenever you are about to do something new, your brain tries to protect you by magnifying all the risks and uncertainties. It whispers that you are not prepared enough, that you need more time, that someone else is better equipped. If you listen to that voice, you will wait indefinitely because no amount of preparation will completely silence it. The truth is that you cannot think your way into confidence. You can only act your way into it. The moment you take a step forward, you give yourself evidence that the fear wasn't fatal, that you could survive the discomfort, and that you are capable of more than you imagine. That evidence is what begins to rewrite your internal story about what you can and cannot do. Think about the first time someone learns to swim. No matter how many books they read about swimming, how many videos they watch, or how much advice they receive, the fear of water remains until they actually get in the pool and start moving. The confidence does not appear before the first attempt. It develops with each kick, each stroke, each breath taken in the water. The same principle applies to almost every area of life. Whether it's speaking on stage, starting a new job, or making a big decision, the growth and the confidence only come through the experience of doing, not the endless waiting and planning. Acting before you feel ready also breaks the cycle of overthinking. People who wait for readiness often trap themselves in analysis, replaying scenarios in their head, imagining worst-case outcomes, and exhausting themselves with preparation that never feels sufficient. This mental loop erodes confidence instead of building it, because it constantly reminds you what could go wrong. Action interrupts that cycle. The moment you step forward, the energy shifts from thinking to doing, and that shift immediately reduces anxiety. You no longer live in the land of, if you start living in the land of what is, where real feedback and real learning occur. That transition is powerful because it grounds you in reality, and reality is never as intimidating as the imagination. Another reason acting before you feel ready builds confidence is that it exposes you to discomfort, and confidence thrives in discomfort. Growth does not happen in the safe zone of what you already know. It happens in the stretch zone where you are challenged, where you don't have all the answers, and where mistakes are possible. Each time you choose action despite uncertainty, you expand that zone. What once felt impossible becomes manageable, and what once made you nervous becomes familiar. Over time, your comfort zone grows, and with it, your confidence grows. That process never starts if you wait until the fear disappears. The fear only fades when you confront it through action. There is also a profound identity shift that happens when you act before feeling ready. You stop seeing yourself as someone who hesitates and start seeing yourself as someone who is willing to leap. That identity is crucial for confidence. The way we see ourselves shapes the way we show up in the world. If your self-image is built around caution and waiting for the perfect moment, your confidence will always be conditional. But if your self-image is built around courage and action, your confidence becomes unconditional because you trust yourself to act regardless of how you feel. History is filled with examples of people who achieved extraordinary things not because they felt ready, but because they acted anyway. Every innovator, every leader, every pioneer faced moments of fear and uncertainty. What separated them from those who hesitated was not superior preparation, but the decision to act in the face of doubt. They understood that the act of moving forward, even imperfectly, was the very thing that would prepare them. Confidence was built not in waiting, but in doing. When you act before you feel ready, you also teach yourself resilience. Not every action will succeed. Sometimes you will stumble, sometimes you will face setbacks, and sometimes things will not go the way you hoped. But each of those outcomes strengthens you because you learn that even when things don't work out, you can handle it. That realization alone is a massive confidence boost. It frees you from the illusion that you need to guarantee success before taking action. You discover that you can survive failure, and that knowledge gives you the courage to keep trying. Perhaps the most important part of this rule is that it creates momentum. Confidence does not come from a single massive leap. It is built through repeated small actions that stack over time. Each time you take a step before you feel ready, you create forward movement. That momentum compounds, turning hesitation into habit and fear into fuel. And with each step, your confidence grows, not because the world becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Confidence is not something reserved for a select few. It is not about being born fearless, flawless, or gifted. It is something we build deliberately, patiently, and consistently through the choices we make every single day. The 5 rules we've explored are not theories, they are practices. When you choose clarity over perfection, when you keep the promises you make to yourself, when you redefine failure as progress, when you surround yourself with growth-minded people, and when you act before you feel ready, you create a foundation of confidence that cannot be shaken by circumstances. Confidence is not about pretending to have no fear. It is about moving forward despite fear. It is not about being perfect. It is about being clear, consistent, and courageous. Every step you take with these rules strengthens the trust you have in yourself. And that trust is the essence of unstoppable confidence. So the next time you feel uncertain, the next time you hesitate or doubt, remember this: confidence is not waiting for you on the other side of success. It is built in the act of stepping forward. Take the step, speak the words, make the move. Because each time you do, you are not just chasing confidence, you are creating it. And when you create it from within, there is nothing in the world that can take it away. Thank you